We all experience it, don't we? This relentless pull towards the next thing. Finishing that email just to get to the next task, maybe rushing through lunch to get back to work, kind of living for the weekend or, the next vacation. And in this constant forward motion, or maybe sometimes dwelling too much in the past, we often feel like we're missing the actual living part.
Skimming the surface.
Yeah, skimming the surface, maybe missing, everything. What if the most ordinary activities, just washing a dish, taking a single step, or even just, breathing, what if they held the key to something truly extraordinary? To unlock a profound sense of presence, maybe peace and deep connection right here, right now.
That feeling you're describing, that sense of dispersion, of being scattered across past and future instead of really being rooted in the present moment, that's a fundamental aspect of the human condition for so many of us.
Definitely.
It feels like we're living for some future moment we hope will finally bring peace, rather than discovering peace in this one.
Exactly. And that's precisely why we're taking a deep dive today into something that is both profound and, incredibly simple. The practice of mindfulness. We've been immersing ourselves in teachings and insights centered around a renowned Zen master, drawing particularly from this beautiful and surprisingly accessible writing that has a very unique origin story.
That's right. It's fascinating because it didn't start as a book planned for, mass publication. It actually grew from a personal letter written by Thich Nhat Hanh to people doing really demanding social work back in Vietnam, trying to maintain their inner lives amidst incredible difficulty.
Right.
And what's really remarkable is how its first translation into English was done. Apparently, it was incredibly mindful in itself, just like 2 pages translated each day over a good stretch of time.
It's amazing. So the process itself was mindful.
It seems like it. That slow, deliberate process filled with intention seems to have woven a kind of special quality into the text itself. And it's since traveled the world, hasn't it? Resonating with people from countless different backgrounds, different communities. Yeah.
Because it blends these ancient traditions in a way that feels natural, accessible, and deeply practical.
And what stands out immediately, I think, is its absolute focus on basic practice. It's not presented as some abstract, unattainable philosophy.
Not at all.
It's about concrete, practical techniques you can start using right now today.
Precisely. It's mindfulness, grounded firmly in lived experience and these venerable ancient traditions, but kind of stripped of unnecessary dogma, designed to be accessible to anyone, regardless of their cultural background, their beliefs, or even prior experience. As the translator wisely observed right at the beginning, one's breath isn't really attached to any particular religion or philosophy. It's just universal.
That makes so much sense. And so our mission for this deep dive is really to extract and present these core principles and practical exercises. We want to unpack these ideas and show you how this kind of deep presence, this mindfulness, can be woven into the very fabric of your daily life, no matter how hectic it might feel.
And explore what kind of truly profound impacts that seemingly simple integration can have.
Yeah, we're going to explore not just what mindfulness is, but the concrete how of practicing it and the essential why it matters for transforming your experience of yourself, your relationships, and, the world around you.
Okay, let's unpack this. So let's start with the absolute foundation. These teachings consistently return to this core concept. What is mindfulness at its essence?
At its most fundamental level, mindfulness is about keeping your consciousness alive to the present reality.
Okay.
It is, quite simply, about being fully aware of what you are doing, where you are, and what is happening within you, your thoughts, your feelings, your body, right here in this single unfolding moment.
It sounds deceptively simple when you put it like that, doesn't it?
It does.
Yet, as we touched on, it feels like the polar opposite of the scattered, multitasking, future-oriented way most of us navigate our days.
It really is the opposite. And this isn't some modern invention, The practice is grounded in historical context, pointing to traditions that predate this particular teaching by decades, even centuries. There's mention of a small book, The Essential Discipline for Daily Use, written by a Buddhist monk named Doc the Buck back in the 1930s.
Oh.
This older book was a collection of mindful thoughts specifically linked to routine, everyday tasks.
So like a built-in reminder system to be present throughout the day.
Exactly. It was designed as a tool, especially for beginners, to help them take hold of their consciousness, which, let's face it, is constantly prone to scattering.
Right.
So when you woke up in the morning, the suggested thought was something like, just awakened, I hope that every person will attain great awareness and see in complete clarity. When you washed your hands, the thought was, Washing my hands, I hope that every person will have pure hands to receive reality. They weren't meant as empty rituals, they were intentional anchors, linking a moment of awareness to a physical action to help train the mind.
That's incredibly practical. It really grounds the abstract idea of awareness in the concrete action of washing your hands or just getting out of bed.
And this historical practice ties directly into ancient foundational texts, particularly something called the Satipatthana Sutta. Now, for those not familiar, a sutta is basically a discourse or teaching, often attributed to the Buddha.
Right.
The Satipatthana Sutta, often called the Discourse on the Foundations of Mindfulness, is a core text outlining the practice. It instructs practitioners to be conscious of their bodily position, knowing with awareness when you are walking, when you're sitting, when you are standing, or when you are lying down.
So just acknowledging the physical state you're in.
Yes, but the emphasis is that it goes far beyond just a simple acknowledgement of position. It means being conscious of each breath, each movement, every physical sensation, every thought, and every feeling, basically. Everything that relates to ourselves, both internally and externally. It's really comprehensive awareness.
The comprehensive awareness, being conscious of everything that feels like, well, a monumental task. And I think that brings us squarely to the immediate and probably the most common challenge people raise, right? The no time problem.
Yes.
How can someone who is deeply engaged in the world, with demanding jobs, family responsibilities, social concerns, how can they possibly find the time, the mental space to be conscious of every single breath, movement, and thought? It just sounds overwhelming.
This is absolutely a crucial point, and it's addressed directly and with a lot of empathy in these teachings. It really acknowledges the reality for concerned, active people who feel they have a million difficulties to resolve, a million things to do, a million roads to take, and hard work to do. It seems impossible to add this layer of constant awareness. But there's a really insightful anecdote offered here about a person named Alan.
Ah, yes, the one who had this revelation about time.
Exactly. Alan shared that he used to divide his time really rigidly. There was time for his children, time for household work, time for his job, and then, if he was lucky, some time left over that was considered his own time, maybe for reading, relaxing personal interests.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
But he felt constantly pressed and deprived of that own time. Then he shifted his perspective entirely. He started considering the time spent with his children, helping them with homework or doing household tasks, as his own time.
So it wasn't about finding extra minutes, but about changing the quality of the minutes he already had.
Precisely. By intentionally bringing his full presence and interest to those moments, really being there, helping his kids with their studies, or washing the dishes or cleaning the house, that time became rich and deeply personal. He wasn't rushing through it to get to some future own time.
He was in it.
He was in it. And by being fully present in those activities, he realized that in principle, he suddenly had, unlimited time. The challenge then, as the teachings note, shifts to maintaining that presence, that mindfulness, because the mind's habit is always to scatter and get distracted.
Which circles back beautifully to that idea that the simple things, the mundane moments, are actually wondrous realities. The example of washing dishes is used to make this point so vividly.
Oh, it's a classic example. The instruction is deceptively simple. While washing the dishes, one should only be washing the dishes.
Right.
This means being completely, utterly aware that you are, in fact, washing dishes. Now, initially, this might sound a bit silly or overly simplistic. Why focus so intently on such a routine chore?
Yeah, why?
But the insight is profound. The very fact that you are standing there, alive, healthy, capable of washing these bowls, that is itself a wondrous reality.
Just being completely yourself right there, following your breath, conscious of your presence, your thoughts flowing, and your actions.
Yes. And the stark contrast is painted. If, while washing the dishes, your mind is solely focused on finishing quickly so you can rush off to drink your cup of tea, treating the dishes as just an obstacle to overcome, you are not truly washing the dishes to wash the dishes. You are not fully present. And the critical point made is you are not truly alive during that time. You're incapable of recognizing or realizing the miracle of life that is unfolding right there at the sink.
And the really powerful consequence follows. If you can't wash the dishes mindfully, with full presence, the chances are extremely high that you won't be able to drink your tea mindfully either.
Exactly right. You'll sit down with your tea, but your mind will already be elsewhere, thinking about the next task, reviewing the day, maybe worrying about tomorrow. You'll barely be aware of the warmth of the cup, the aroma, the taste.
Yeah.
You're described as being sucked away into the future, completely incapable of actually living, truly experiencing that minute, or frankly, any minute of your life. Mindfulness is the antidote to this state of forgetfulness and dispersion is what anchors you.
So it's much more than just being calm or relaxed. It's about being fully present, fully engaged, fully alive in whatever activity is happening right now.
It's beautifully described as being both the seed and the fruit of the practice. The practice of mindfulness itself is the seed that, when you cultivate it, builds concentration power. And the fruit is the awakened life itself, the life of awareness, the full, vibrant presence of life in every moment. It is what liberates us from being scattered and enables us to truly inhabit and live each minute fully.
Okay, that really establishes the what and the why of mindfulness. It's about present awareness, finding the extraordinary in the ordinary, and not being lost in the past or future. So now the how. What are the practical tools and core practices emphasized to actually cultivate this presence?
Well, the teachings point immediately and consistently to the breath. It's seen as the most natural, readily available, and incredibly effective tool for cultivating mindfulness.
Right, it's always there.
Always there. The breath is described as the bridge connecting your life, your consciousness, and your body. It's always in the present moment. So whenever your mind scatters, whenever you feel lost, you can use your breath to gently take hold of it again.
It's like an anchor that's always accessible no matter what.
Precisely. And the Anapanasati Sutta, which translates roughly to the Discourse on Mindfulness of Breathing, provides the foundational instructions. The basic practice is elegantly simple. Breathing in a long breath. I am breathing in a long breath. Breathing out a long breath. I am breathing out a long breath.
Just knowing.
Just knowing, and you apply the same awareness to short breaths as well.
The Sutta also talks about training to experience the whole breath body. Can you unpack what that means in practice?
Yeah, that goes beyond just noticing the length of the breath. It's about becoming aware of the entire physical sensation associated with the breath. Experiencing a whole breath body, I shall breathe in, and experiencing the whole breath body, I shall breathe out.
Okay.
It's feeling the movement, the expansion, the subtle sensations throughout your torso, maybe even beyond. It also includes training to calm the activity of the breath body, breathing in and out with the intention of soothing and settling the physical process of breathing itself. This sort of holistic awareness of the breath's physical aspect helps deepen the anchor to the present moment.
And practicing with the breath in this way is said to build something called concentration power.
That's right. It's explicitly stated that concentration power comes from the practice of mindfulness, and this concentration is essential for awakening. Taking hold of one's breath, bringing that focused, sustained awareness to it, is in a very real sense becoming awakened in that moment. Watching and following the breath consistently helps you maintain mindfulness over extended periods. It's presented as a truly wondrous and accessible method for taking hold of your consciousness and preventing it from being pulled away.
So the breath isn't just about relaxation, although that might happen. It's an active tool for focus and presence.
Very much so.
Now, beyond just sitting and focusing on breath, there's significant attention given to practicing mindfulness while walking.
Yes, this section is titled "The Miracle is to Walk on Earth." It suggests that when walking along a path, whether it's a quiet country road or a busy city street, you try to keep the thought, "I'm walking along the path," alive in your consciousness. But importantly, this isn't meant to be some mechanical repetition. It's about truly seeing each step, seeing the wonder of your foot lifting, moving forward and connecting with the ground. Each step is presented as an infinite wonder.
Seeing it as a joy that opens the heart and allows you to enter into the world of reality. That's a beautiful way to put it.
It is, and this leads to one of the most powerful and perhaps counterintuitive insights. People usually consider walking on water or in thin air a miracle, but I think the real miracle is not to walk either on water or in thin air, but to walk on earth.
Wow.
It reminds us that every single day we are surrounded by countless miracles: the blue sky above us, the shape of the clouds, the vibrant green of leaves, the depth in a child's eyes, the very fact that we have eyes to see with, and yet, caught in our distraction, we often fail to recognize them.
Right.
Mindfulness in walking, just like mindfulness in washing dishes, makes these everyday miracles apparent and accessible again.
What about the challenge, though, of practicing mindfulness when walking with others, especially if they're talking? That seems significantly more difficult than walking alone in quiet contemplation.
It absolutely is. And the teachings acknowledge this directly. There's a quote from a Vietnamese folk song that speaks to this. Hardest of all is to practice the way at home, second in the crowd, and third in the pagoda.
Interesting order.
Yeah, it emphasizes that applying mindfulness in active, demanding situations in the midst of family life, in public, in the workplace, is where the real practice lies and where it cultivates the deepest concentration power.
Okay.
So if you're walking with someone and they start talking and your immediate unmindful reaction is a thought like, oh, I wish this fellow would just be quiet so I could focus on my walking, well, you've lost mindfulness right there.
Right, the resistance.
Exactly. The mindful response described is to acknowledge the situation without resistance. If he wishes to talk, I will answer, but I will continue in mindfulness, aware we are walking together, aware of what we say, and I can continue to watch my breath quietly as I listen or speak. It definitely requires a higher degree of awareness and presence, but practicing in those demanding situations is precisely what builds stronger concentration.
That makes sense. The internal resistance is the break in mindfulness, not necessarily the external situation itself.
Precisely. Now, turning to sitting, which is often considered the classic posture for meditation and a core practice described.
Why sit? Is the purpose just to relax, or is there more to it?
Relaxation is certainly a starting point, and a welcome consequence, no doubt, but the aspiration is deeper. Sitting meditation is presented as a practice for realizing total rest, for advancing deeper into the state of meditation itself, and for resolving the worries, anxieties, and troubles that typically occupy and block our consciousness. While lying down can be very restful, the suggestion is that one can go much deeper in concentrated awareness by sitting upright.
And are specific postures recommended?
Yes, various postures are discussed to allow for that physical stillness and alertness. These include the full lotus position, the half lotus, the Japanese style of kneeling on your legs, or simply sitting upright on a chair with your feet flat on the floor. The key across all these is to keep your back straight and your head aligned with your spine, sort of erect but not stiff. Your shoulders should be relaxed, hands resting comfortably, typically with the left hand, palm up, resting in the palm of the right hand. And your eyes can be gently focused slightly ahead, maybe a yard or two down.
And there's this mention of the half smile. That sounds like a very gentle instruction.
It is, and it's considered really important. Maintaining a slight, gentle half smile while sitting actually helps relax the hundreds of muscles in your face.
Huh. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, and this physical relaxation in the face seems to have a profound effect on calming the mind and bringing a sense of inner peace. It's described as cultivating the same serene smile you often see depicted on statues of the Buddha. Along with the smile, the instruction is to consciously release every muscle in your body, letting go of any tension you find.
So, in sitting, the core technique is basically watching the breath and letting go.
That's essentially it. Watching your breath and letting go of everything else. Consciously releasing every muscle, every tension. The idea is that with practice, after maybe 15 to 20 minutes of sitting correctly in this way, you can reach a state of deep quiet filled with inner peace and a profound sense of joy. The key insight here is that the practice is finding that relaxation and peace. It's not something you do to get to peace later. The mindful sitting is the peace right then and there.
So it's not about enduring the sitting to find peace later, but discovering the peace in the act of sitting itself.
Exactly. And there's a beautiful, memorable image offered to help cultivate this state of letting go. The pebble analogy.
Ah, the pebble sinking to the riverbed. I remember reading that.
Yeah. You imagine yourself as a smooth, round pebble. When you throw a pebble into a river, it doesn't struggle or thrash about, does it? It just sinks effortlessly through the water, detached from everything it passes, falling directly to the bottom, which is the point of perfect rest.
Okay.
You're encouraged to visualize yourself like that pebble, letting go of all your thoughts, worries, plans, tensions, allowing yourself to sink towards the riverbed of your being. And at the very center of your being, the teaching says, is your breath. This image helps cultivate the feeling of complete letting go and finding deep, effortless rest.
And again, the emphasis is firmly on finding this peace and joy now in this moment of sitting, not some future moment.
It's put quite starkly, actually. If you cannot find joy and peace in these very moments of sitting, then the future itself will only flow by as a river flows by. You will not be able to hold it back. You will be incapable of living the future when it has become the present.
Wow.
It really reinforces the idea that the capacity for a full, present life is cultivated and found in the present moment. this very spot, this very moment while you are sitting, is where enlightenment, or at least a deeper understanding, is possible. And consistent, regular practice definitely helps make sitting easier and more profoundly effective over time.
There are also several specific practical exercises detailed for working with breath in different situations beyond just formal sitting, right?
Yes, absolutely. Many variations are described to help integrate breath mindfulness throughout the day. One is measuring your breath by your footsteps when walking slowly.
How does that work?
You synchronize the length of your inhale and exhale with a specific number of steps. Maybe you count 1, 2, 3 steps on the inhale and 1, 2, 3 steps on the exhale. Or you can link the steps to short, mindful phrases like, "My heart is now at peace," or "I walk on the new green earth," taking a few steps per syllable.
That's a lovely way to make walking a kind of moving meditation.
It really is. Another technique is simply counting your breath, typically from 1 to 10, while either sitting or walking. You count 1 after inhaling and exhaling the first breath, 2 after the second up to 10, and then you just return to 1. If your mind wanders and you lose count, which it will, you simply return gently to 1. This simple counting helps tie your wandering mind back to the anchor of your breath.
And following the breath while doing other things like listening to music or even having a conversation, that sounds more advanced.
Yes, that's definitely a more advanced practice for integrating mindfulness into active situations. You maintain a quiet awareness of your breath flowing in and out while simultaneously being present with the external stimuli, the music, the conversation. The goal isn't to shut out the external world, but to include it within the field of your awareness, anchored by the breath, without getting completely lost in it.
Okay.
And then there's the core following the breath exercise, often done in sitting. It involves starting with just observing your natural breath, then maybe intentionally moving to longer breaths for a while, feeling the full extension, and finally cultivating an awareness of the entire breath body and feelings of peace and joy connected to the breath cycle. The emphasis throughout all these is keeping the breath light, even, and flowing, like a thin stream or a water snake, not rugged or forced. Mastering the breath in this way is considered a path to gaining control over both body and mind. It's really the primary tool to employ whenever the mind feels dispersed or overwhelmed.
There's even a brief mention of the potential for healing physical illness through consistent breath practice.
There is, including a personal account. However, it's quickly clarified that while breath practice can indeed yield significant physical benefits, maybe calming the nervous system, improving circulation, things like that, these are considered positive byproducts.
Oh.
The primary and true purpose of breath mindfulness is the realization and cultivation of mindfulness itself, which is described as the essential tool for liberation and awakened living. The core message always comes back to practicing mindfulness, not just in formal sitting sessions, but continuously. When you walk, stand, lie down, sit, and work.
So the power isn't just in the dedicated time on the cushion, but in weaving this awareness into the fabric of your entire day.
Absolutely. It's about transforming every single action, no matter how small or routine, into a moment of presence, almost like a small rite, infusing it with full attention and awareness.
Okay, so we've explored working with the body and breath as these foundational practices, but mindfulness also extends inward, doesn't it, to our thoughts and feelings. This seems like the next, perhaps more challenging layer of the practice.
It definitely is. While cultivating a tranquil heart and achieving physical relaxation are important results of meditation, the path goes deeper towards cultivating a truly clear and liberated mind. And to take hold of your mind effectively, you need to observe and recognize everything about it.
Everything.
Well, yeah, the idea is to be aware of what's arising not just during your formal sitting practice, but in the continuous flow of daily life.
That still sounds incredibly daunting. How do you even begin to recognize every thought and feeling that arises? That seems impossible.
Well, the approach starts by clarifying what the intention is not. When a feeling or thought arises, whether it's one we label as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, maybe sadness, anxiety, irritation, joy, a memory, a plan, the intention is not to immediately try to chase it away, or suppress it, or hate it, or worry excessively about it, or be frightened by it, especially if it's a difficult emotion or what seems like a negative thought.
So it's explicitly not about trying to achieve a blank mind or only have good thoughts.
Yeah.
That's a relief.
Exactly. The essential instruction, the core practice here, is simply to acknowledge its presence. It's a quiet, non-judgmental recognition. You might say to yourself silently, a feeling of sadness has just arisen in me, or an unwholesome thought has just arisen, or, okay, planning thought is here. The act is one of pure recognition, just noting what is present in your consciousness without immediately getting entangled in the content or trying to force it away.
And it's crucial not to judge these thoughts or feelings as they arise.
Absolutely crucial. The teaching warns against being dominated by the distinction between good and evil or wholesome and unwholesome in this initial stage of recognition. You're encouraged to welcome and treat all feelings and thoughts on an equal basis, in the sense that they are all part of yourself in that moment. The analogy used is like a palace guard who simply stands by the corridor entrance, aware of every face that passes through, noting their presence without judgment or attachment. You just need to know what's walking through the corridor of your mind. Know when you have departed from the state of mindfulness, and know when you are still rooted in presence.
But what if this simple recognition isn't enough? What if you are truly consumed, maybe possessed by a really strong emotion, like deep sadness, pervasive anxiety, or intense anger? Sometimes just noting it doesn't feel like it cuts it.
Right. If simple recognition proves insufficient, if you feel overwhelmed or dominated by a particular state of mind, a deeper approach is suggested. Turning to meditation on a fixed object, but using your state of mind itself as the subject of the meditation.
So meditating on the sadness or anger rather than trying to push it away or ignore it.
Precisely. It's a practice of bringing concentrated mindfulness directly to the difficult emotion or thought pattern. It's like shining a concentrated beam of light onto it. This kind of meditation, using the concentration power you've cultivated through practices like breath mindfulness, can reveal the true nature of these difficult states and facilitate healing and transformation. It's described with the analogy of using a thorn to remove a thorn, using a tool that resembles the problem itself to resolve it. You're encouraged to treat these difficult states gently, with respect, living with them for a period, making peace with their presence, and seeking to penetrate their nature. This often involves contemplating interdependence or emptiness in the sense of seeing they don't have a separate, fixed existence.
Contemplating the interdependence of the feeling or thought itself.
Yes. Understanding that the feeling or thought doesn't exist in isolation. It arises dependent on causes and conditions, many of which are within yourself. The subjects for this kind of contemplation must be real, rooted in your own lived experience, not just abstract philosophical concepts you read somewhere. There's another compelling analogy used here: cooking food. Yourself, your being, is the pot. Concentration, born from mindfulness, is the heat. The subject you are contemplating, whether it's a difficult emotion, an idea, or a concept like interdependence, is the food.
Okay.
Without enough heat, that's the concentration power sustained by mindfulness, the food won't cook properly, it won't reveal its true nature, and you won't achieve the liberation or insight you seek.
So it's not just passive observation, it's bringing active, concentrated awareness to understand and ultimately transform the contents of the mind, especially the really challenging ones.
Exactly. It's a kind of investigative awareness. And this awareness, this cultivation of mindfulness of mind and feelings, needs to extend continuously into our daily actions, just like mindfulness of the body. And there's a wonderful array of specific, practical exercises suggested for applying mindfulness right in the midst of everyday life.
Okay, let's dive into some of those. They really seem designed to integrate the practice seamlessly, don't they?
They really are. For example, the half-smile exercises we talked about for sitting. They aren't just for sitting. You can practice that gentle half smile at various points throughout the day. The moment you wake up, during any free moments you might have, maybe waiting in line, on your commute while listening to music, or very specifically, the moment you recognize you are feeling irritated or angry. That physical act of smiling can help diffuse tension and bring a small shift in perspective.
And the letting go exercises. Similar idea.
Yeah, practicing conscious letting go isn't limited to formal meditation. You can do simple letting go exercises while lying down before sleep or anytime you're resting. Intentionally scanning your body, feeling for tension, and consciously releasing each muscle group, maybe combining it with mindful breathing. And deep breathing, specifically focusing on the rise and fall of your stomach, is presented as a simple yet effective exercise, particularly helpful when lying down and trying to relax deeply.
We talked about measuring breath by footsteps for walking. What about other common daily tasks? The things we often just do on autopilot.
Oh, there are detailed instructions and perspectives for bringing mindfulness to those routine chores, transforming them from mindless tasks into moments of real presence. Making tea, for instance, is presented almost as a sacred act. You're instructed to do every movement slowly, mindfully, not letting any detail pass by unnoticed. Be aware of your hand reaching for the pot, the weight of it, the sound of the water pouring, the aroma rising. Follow each step in mindfulness, breathing gently. It's about treating the process with reverence, seeing the wonder in those simple steps.
I like that.
Washing dishes, building on our earlier point, is about doing it relaxingly, seeing each bowl you hold as sacred, following your breath with each scrub and rinse. It's declared that washing the dishes is meditation. It's presented as the most important thing in life in that exact moment. You aren't doing it just to finish, you're doing it to be fully present with the act of washing. Washing clothes. The suggestion is maybe wash just a few items at a time to keep it manageable. Find a comfortable position, scrub slowly and relaxingly, paying full attention to the movements of your hands, the feel of the soap, the water, the fabric. The aim is for your mind and body to feel as clean and fresh as the clothes afterward, reflecting the cleansing power of concentrated attention.
That's interesting.
Cleaning house. This can be broken down into smaller tasks, like dusting, sweeping, scrubbing. The instruction is to do these tasks slowly, perhaps even 3 times slower than your usual pace, with full, unwavering attention on each step. Avoid abrupt, hurried movements. Each sweep of the broom, each wipe of the cloth is a moment for presence.
And a slow-motion bath. This is presented as a luxurious and deeply mindful practice. You're encouraged to take 30 to 45 minutes, making every motion light and slow. Be attentive to every part of your body as you wash it, every stream of water, every sensation. The goal is for your mind to feel as peaceful and light as your body feels afterward. It's a practice of fully inhabiting your physical self and caring for it with deep attention.
These are beautiful illustrations of how really any activity, no matter how mundane it seems, can become an opportunity for practice.
That's the profound shift these teachings offer. It moves mindfulness from being something you add to your life, like another task, to something you are in your life. And to help establish this deeply ingrained habit, especially for those with busy, active lives, there's a strong suggestion to dedicate 1 full day each week entirely to the practice of mindfulness, a day of mindfulness.
A whole day. That sounds like a more intensive way to cultivate the habit.
It's described as a vital lever, a concentrated period that lifts your overall level of mindfulness and makes it easier to carry into the rest of your week. It's seen as crucial, particularly for people engaged in demanding work, to prevent them from getting completely lost in the cycle of worry, planning, reaction, and to ensure that when they do act or respond, their actions are effective and useful, not just driven by stress or burnout.
How would someone actually structure a day like that? What does it look like?
A detailed framework is provided. You begin upon waking by reminding yourself that this is your dedicated day of mindfulness. Maybe have a visual reminder somewhere prominent.
Okay.
Then the entire day is approached with the intention of maintaining mindfulness in every activity. You wake up slowly, following your breath. Your morning routine, brushing teeth, washing face, getting dressed, is done calmly and mindfully, paying attention to each sensation and movement. Any household work is done with ease, attention, and a sense of oneness with the task, maybe doing it more slowly than usual. You're encouraged to maintain silence as much as possible, or at least ensure any talking or singing is done mindfully, intentionally. Preparing and eating meals are done mindfully, paying attention to the process of preparing food, the look, smell, and taste of the food, the act of chewing and swallowing. Drinking tea becomes a practice in itself, done slowly, reverently, seeing the cup and the tea as the most precious reality in that moment, not rushing towards the last sip. Evening activities like reading, writing letters, spending time with loved ones are approached with the same full attention. There's usually a light evening meal, often followed by dedicated sitting meditation. Maybe an evening walk, again with mindful steps and breath. And finally, going to sleep with mindfulness, being aware of the body resting.
The instruction to do things slowly, at least twice as slow as usual, really stands out as key there.
It does. That deliberate slowing down isn't about inefficiency. It's a technique to create space for awareness, to prevent the mind from rushing ahead and to anchor you firmly in the present moment. And there's a powerful promise offered that after only 3 months of observing just 1 day of mindfulness per week, you will experience a significant, measurable change in your life.
Really? Just 1 day a week?
That's the suggestion. This dedicated day's practice begins to naturally penetrate and infuse the other 6 days, gradually leading you towards a state of living mindfully throughout the entire week. It's presented as having an immeasurable positive effect.
So the day of mindfulness is like a training ground, a concentrated burst of practice that helps build the muscle for consistent, everyday mindfulness.
Exactly. It reinforces that mindfulness isn't just a weekend hobby or something confined to a retreat center. It's a practice for transforming the entirety of one's life experience right where you are.
We've covered the foundation, the core practices with body and breath, and how to expand mindfulness into daily life and manage thoughts and feelings. But the teachings also move into deeper contemplations, going beyond just cultivating a tranquil mind, right?
Yes, absolutely. A tranquil heart and a clear mind are significant and wonderful results of practice, but the teachings point towards deeper contemplations aimed at liberation from suffering, cultivating genuine fearlessness, and awakening boundless compassion. These aren't presented as purely intellectual or philosophical exercises, mind you.
Okay.
They're seen as profound insights reached through bringing concentrated mindfulness to bear on the nature of reality itself.
And one of the central contemplations discussed is interdependence.
Interdependence, yeah. Or sometimes it's referred to as emptiness, which doesn't mean nothingness, but rather the lack of a separate, independent, unchanging self or existence for anything. The important point is that this isn't just philosophical reflection. It's described as a penetration of the mind into reality, using the power of concentration derived from mindfulness to reveal the true interconnected nature of things. A simple way to approach this is recognizing a fundamental truth. The subject of knowledge always requires an object. You can't see without seeing something. Your mind, which knows, is fundamentally interdependent with its object, that which is known.
Okay.
For example, mindfulness of breath means the knowledge of the breath and the breath itself are interdependently linked in the moment of awareness. One doesn't exist in that context without the other.
And how does contemplating this interdependence lead to liberation from suffering and fear? That seems like a big leap.
It comes through contemplating the 5 aggregates, which are the components that Western psychology might loosely call personality or self, form, our body, feeling, sensations, emotions, perception, recognition, labeling, mental functionings, volition, intentions, etc., and consciousness, basic awareness. As you look deeply, you begin to see them not as a fixed, independent self, but as constantly changing interdependent processes. They arise and pass away based on conditions. When you deeply penetrate the understanding that there is no permanent, separate, sealed-off self made up of these aggregates, you begin to break down the illusion of being an isolated entity.
Right, the illusion that needs constant defending.
Exactly. Or that is separate from everything else. The teaching emphasizes that we are not sealed off. We are life, limitless, present in and dependent upon countless other phenomena. When you see deeply that the suffering and joy of others are fundamentally interconnected with your own, the walls of separation begin to dissolve.
This really shifts the perspective from a small, contained me to something vast and interconnected, doesn't it?
It really does. And seeing this interdependence deeply liberates you from being oppressed by the reality of impermanence, because you see everything is already changing and flowing, and from the extremes of attachment to success or fear of failure, because you see how conditioned and non-ultimate these things really are. It encourages you to strip away the perceived barriers and live in recognition of your connection to universal life.
That is a truly profound shift in how one perceives reality. Another contemplation mentioned is quite intense and perhaps challenging for many: the meditation on the corpse.
Yes, this is a traditional contemplation described in the Satipatthana Sutta as part of meditating on the body. The practice involves contemplating the body's decomposition, visualizing its stages after death, becoming swollen, turning blue, being eaten by worms, becoming a skeleton, and eventually turning to dust.
Wow.
And crucially, applying this perception directly to one's own body, recognizing that it too will undergo this exact same process.
That sounds like it would bring up a lot of discomfort or maybe revulsion for people. What's the purpose of such a practice? It sounds grim.
The primary purpose is precisely to overcome that revulsion and, more deeply, the pervasive fear of death that underlies so much anxiety. By courageously looking death directly in the face, recognizing its inevitability, and accepting it as a natural process just as we accept life, the teaching suggests that life itself is then seen as infinitely, unbelievably precious.
Oh, I see.
Every single second becomes profoundly valuable, not just your own life, but the lives of every other person, every other being, every reality you encounter.
And seeing life and death not as opposites, but maybe two essential faces of life itself.
Exactly, like 2 sides of a coin. You can't really have one without the other. Birth and death are seen as 2 aspects of the same continuous process of life. This contemplation helps you rise above the conventional fear of birth and death, enabling you to understand, in a deep experiential way, how to truly live and how to truly die. Bodhisattvas, figures in Buddhism who embody awakened compassion and wisdom, are described as entering into the cycles of birth and death with freedom, like a skilled boatman riding the waves rather than being submerged by them.
So this seemingly grim practice
is actually about cultivating a deep appreciation for life and transcending the fear that often limits how we live. That's powerful.
It really is. It's about fully embracing reality, including its inevitable changes. And this practice of seeing deeply, of recognizing impermanence and interdependence, connects to the idea of non-discrimination mind. This is described as a state of ultimate perfection and understanding, where the conventional distinction between subject, the observer, and object, that which is observed, dissolves.
Non-discrimination mind.
Yeah.
How would someone even begin to experience or understand that kind of state? It sounds very abstract.
Well, the teachings offer beautiful examples of this state as a profound, almost sacred communion. It's not necessarily some distant mystical attainment. It can arise in moments of deep presence and connection. The example given is the author's experience translating applications for sponsorship from orphaned children. When looking deeply at a child's photo and reading their story, feeling a profound connection, a special communion could arise. In those moments, the conventional sense of I, the translator or benefactor, helping that child, the recipient, just dissolves. The experience becomes, as described, the child and I are one. No one pities, no one asks for help, no one helps. It's pure communion, the sense of separate identities temporarily melting away in the face of shared humanity and suffering or hope.
That example makes it much clearer. Seeing deeply dissolves the perception of separation, the labels of helper and helped.
Exactly. It's also illustrated by a classic Zen story. When asked about the wonder of reality or the truth, a Zen master simply pointed to a cypress tree in the courtyard. The suggestion is that if your heart is open, not clouded by false views or conceptual distinctions, you can enter into a natural communion with that tree. To see the almond tree deeply, not just as an object separate from yourself, but as truth, as reality, even as your own self, is to truly see the way.
And when the mind is liberated through these deeper contemplations, when those barriers begin to dissolve, what happens to the heart? What's the emotional result?
The teaching says that when the mind is liberated in this way, the heart naturally floods with boundless compassion. This compassion is first for yourself, recognizing the suffering you have endured due to false views, ignorance, and the illusion of a separate self. And then it naturally extends outward to others because you see clearly that they are also trapped by those same illusions and experiencing similar suffering. You begin to look at yourself and all other beings with the eyes of compassion, described as being like a saint who hears and responds to the cry of every single creature. This is referred to as the meditation on compassion.
So actively practicing looking at all beings with compassionate eyes, cultivating that feeling.
Yes. And this practice is encouraged both during formal sitting meditation and throughout your activities and service in the world, remembering that sacred call to look at all beings with the eyes of compassion. It's seen as flowing organically from the deeper understanding of interdependence and the dissolution of the separate self.
The teachings also briefly mention other subjects for meditation and contemplation, things like self, emptiness, non-attachment, suggesting they can also reveal profound truths and lead to healing when approached with concentrated mindfulness and rooted in one's own direct reality.
And importantly, these deep insights are always woven back into the context of everyday life and service. It's stated quite clearly that a peace worker, or really anyone living an active life, must take care of their own life, their own inner state first. Their work is only a part of that life. But even that work can only be truly life-giving when done in mindfulness. Otherwise, you risk becoming like someone who lives as though dead, just going through the motions without real presence or vitality.
It sounds like cultivating your own inner peace and clarity isn't selfish at all. It's actually foundational to being truly effective and compassionate in the world. It's like lighting your own torch, which then naturally provides light for those around you because, well, everything is connected.
That's exactly the core message. If you know how to live in mindfulness, how to preserve and care for your own mind and heart, your very presence naturally influences others in a positive way, without even trying sometimes.
Which brings us beautifully to the section on the impact and application of mindfulness. Sharing stories and wisdom about how this practice affects not just our individual inner state, but our relationships, our communities, and maybe even extends to the environment around us.
Exactly. There's a well-known and very insightful story included about the two acrobats, which serves as such a powerful analogy for this ripple effect of personal mindfulness.
Oh, right, the teacher and the student with the pole.
That's the one. A teacher and his young student, named Maida, they performed together by balancing a tall bamboo pole. The teacher would balance the heavy pole on his head, while Maida, the student, climbed carefully to the very top and stayed there as the teacher walked around. Both had to maintain perfect, absolute balance to succeed and avoid disaster.
Okay, high stakes. What instruction did the teacher give his student?
The teacher said to Mita, "Listen, Mita, I will watch you carefully, and you watch me carefully, so that we can help each other maintain our concentration and balance. That way, we'll be sure not to fall and earn enough to eat."
That seems like a very logical approach. Mutual vigilance, watching out for each other. Makes sense.
It does, from a conventional perspective. But the student, Mita, was wise, maybe embodying a deeper understanding. She answered her teacher, "Dear master, I think it would be better for each of us to watch ourselves. To look after oneself means to look after both of us."
That completely shifts the perspective. From external monitoring to internal responsibility.
And the story goes that the Buddha, upon hearing this, declared that the child Mita had spoken correctly. The profound point here is the supreme importance and effectiveness of practicing mindfulness of one's own self, diligently protecting and caring for your own inner state, your own balance and concentration. The most effective way to contribute to the safety and well-being of the whole, whether it's an acrobat pair, a family, a team, or a community, is for each individual to take full responsibility for their own state of presence and mindfulness. Don't be primarily preoccupied with watching others or worrying about how they're doing. Doing your absolute best to maintain your own mindfulness is the surest, most powerful way to naturally remind and influence those around you to do their best as well.
That's a truly counterintuitive but powerful idea. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's the most fundamental way you contribute to the collective good and stability. Your own stable presence creates a positive ripple effect.
And these teachings even extend this ripple effect beyond human relationships, suggesting it can influence the environment itself, sharing some interesting anecdotes.
Like the dog and the music.
Yeah, the story about Kirsten and her dog, who apparently became agitated and whined when she played loud, discordant music, but would lie down peacefully and seem content when she played classical pieces like Bach or Mozart.
Yes, that's a sweet example.
And a more formal report is mentioned about playing Mozart for plants in Canada, which resulted in the plants growing faster and even inclining themselves towards the music source. Similar effects were reported when Mozart was played in fields of wheat and rye.
So the energy, maybe the quality of presence or vibration, seems to have a palpable impact on living things around us.
That's the implication. A contrast is drawn, suggesting that conference rooms filled with angry, stressful words likely wouldn't be conducive to plant growth. And conversely, a garden tended by a mindful monk, cultivated with peace and presence, is described as having flowers that are always fresh and green, as if nourished by the very peace and joy flowing from the monk's mindfulness. It references an ancient saying, "When a great master is born, the water in the rivers turns clearer and the plants grow greener." This imagery suggests that a deep state of inner peace and mindful presence has an outward, tangible effect on the living world.
That's a beautiful, almost poetic way to describe the impact. It suggests our internal state isn't just contained within us.
It radiates outward. And based on this, there's even a practical suggestion offered. Perhaps listen to calming music or practice mindful breathing for a few minutes before entering important meetings or difficult discussions as a way to bring a more peaceful and mindful presence into that shared space.
Worth a try. Finally, the teachings conclude with a truly timeless story, a parable attributed to Tolstoy, which beautifully encapsulates so many of these core ideas about presence, the importance of the moment, and compassionate action. It's the story of the Emperor's 3 questions.
It's a perfect summary, isn't it? The story begins with an emperor who was deeply troubled and wanted to know the answers to 3 fundamental questions. He believed that if he knew the answers, he would never stray in any matter and would always be successful and effective.
And the questions were:
what is the best time to do each thing? Who are the most important people to work with? And what is the most important thing to do at all times?
He sought answers from wise men across his kingdom, but got countless different conflicting answers, none of which really satisfied him.
Exactly. So he decided to seek out a renowned hermit, a man widely believed to be enlightened and possessing true wisdom. The emperor disguised himself as a simple peasant because the hermit was known to only receive the poor and simple folk, not royalty.
Okay.
He traveled to the hermit's remote dwelling and found the old man digging his garden, frail and tired. The emperor offered to help, taking the spade and digging for a long time. He then asked the hermit his 3 questions, but the hermit didn't answer. He just listened quietly and continued his digging.
And then, unexpectedly, a wounded man appeared.
Yes, A man burst from the woods, bleeding profusely from a severe stomach wound. The emperor and the hermit immediately dropped everything they were doing. Without hesitation, they focused their attention entirely on this suffering man. They carefully cleaned and bandaged his wound, carried him into the hermit's hut, and cared for him through the night. The emperor, exhausted from the day's digging and the effort of caring for the wounded man, finally fell asleep in the hut.
And the wounded man turned out to be the emperor's enemy, seeking revenge.
That's correct. When the man recovered consciousness the next morning, he confessed that he was an enemy of the emperor who had come to take revenge and kill him because the emperor had killed his brother and seized his property. But seeing the emperor, his enemy, care for him with such compassion and diligence had completely transformed his heart, and he asked for forgiveness.
Wow. And after all of this, the emperor, before leaving, asked the hermit his 3 questions one last time.
And the hermit, looking at the emperor who had just lived the answers, gave his simple, profound reply. His answers weren't abstract theories, but distilled wisdom drawn directly from the immediate lived experience they had just shared. He said, "The only important time is now, W. It is the only time when you have any power to act." He said, "The most important person is the one you are with at this moment, because no one knows if they will ever have dealings with any other person."
Right.
And he said the most important thing is to do that person good, because that alone is the mission of humankind.
Wow. When you hear them in the context of that story, those answers are incredibly simple, yet they land with such immense power and relevance, don't they?
They really do. And they connect perfectly, profoundly back to the practice of mindfulness we've been exploring. The present moment, the nabl, is the only reality where life is actually happening, where mindfulness can be applied.
Yeah.
The person you are with in this moment, your immediate reality, whether it's the hermit digging, the wounded enemy, your child doing homework, your colleague, or even yourself in the mirror, that is the most important person, the point of direct interaction with life. And acting with compassion, bringing goodness to that interaction, doing good for that person in that moment, that is the most important thing, because it is the direct manifestation of understanding, of presence, of mindfulness embodied in action.
It brings those expansive contemplations on compassion and interdependence right down to the most personal, immediate level, just how you are with the person right in front of you right now.
Exactly. It takes the universal principles and makes them immediate and personal.
So to bring this deep dive into mindfulness to a close, the core message that emerges, loud and clear, is that mindfulness is really about consciously choosing to be fully present, keeping your awareness alive to the reality of the now, in every single moment, even the most ordinary, easily overlooked ones.
And the breath is presented as our ever-present, reliable tool to anchor us to this moment, to cultivate focus and prevent our minds from being perpetually scattered into past worries or future anxieties.
Yeah, and the practices described span such a wide range, don't they? From simple physical acts like cultivating a half smile or mindfully washing a dish, to more dedicated formal sitting meditation using the breath and conscious letting go. All the way to profound contemplations on the nature of self, interdependence, and cultivating boundless compassion.
And the beauty of these teachings is the understanding that these practices aren't just for achieving personal calm or insight, although that's valuable. Their effect naturally ripples outward, positively influencing those around you, your community, and as those anecdotes suggest, perhaps even the environment itself.
And the timeless wisdom, echoed in ancient texts and simple stories like Tolstoy's, constantly reminds us that the only time that truly matters is the present moment. The most important person is whoever you happen to be with right now, and the most important action you can take is to bring presence, awareness, and goodness to that interaction.
These ideas, as is consistently emphasized, are not meant for mere intellectual understanding or philosophical debate. They come from deep, lived experience and are offered as tools for your own practice.
So the invitation is really just to begin. Start small. Perhaps try consciously cultivating a half smile the moment you wake up tomorrow morning. Or choose one simple task tonight, like washing a single dish, brushing your teeth, or drinking a glass of water, and just try doing it as if it is the most sacred, important act in the world with your full attention.
Or just spend one quiet minute focusing solely on the feeling of your breath moving in and out. Maybe, when you feel ready, dedicate a day of mindfulness to experience the power of sustained presence.
Every small act of mindful presence, every intentional return to the now, builds the foundation for a life that is more fully experienced, more vibrant, and more deeply connected.
Absolutely.
Building on that profound idea that life and death are two essential phases of life, and that our deep interdependence means we are fundamentally connected to everything, The suggestion seems to be that truly seeing and caring for yourself, diligently cultivating your own mindfulness in this very moment, well, it isn't an act of selfishness at all.
On the contrary, it's presented as perhaps the most profound act of service one can undertake.
Because it is only by being truly present, rooted, and caring for your own state of being in this moment that you can be fully available, fully capable, and fully present to offer genuine compassion and goodness to all beings you encounter, creating that essential ripple effect we talked about. So as you go about your day, maybe consider this. What would change in your life, in your interactions, and perhaps even in the world around you, if you truly began to live as though your presence and awareness in this single ordinary moment mattered infinitely?